it's more about the grooming of young boys, but it's in the children's homes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There was one up here for Neath.
For Neath, I mean, Scotland has had a rough deal with a lot of it because, look, England is the second most densely populated country in Europe. I think Malta is more densely populated than Monaco, you know. But Scotland is the second least populated country, right? It's got, a fraction of the people and huge amounts of land. So you can be cut off quite easily up here, you know. And there was a lot of kids' homes got built up here. But the Scottish attitude was different to the rest of the UK because Scotland was a country that resisted taking children off of parents. Even in the Scottish penal system, they would allow children to accompany parents into prison, which you see in the third world, because they think separation causes terrible anxiety. So Scotland had a total different attitude. It was more of a tribal attitude than we got down south. So they had to implement a lot more change into Scotland because of that adherence to the family structure. And they set up these homes, these benevolent homes, to give respite to struggling families. So they started setting up these places all over, industrial schools all over Scotland. But they were mainly taking kids from sort of the impoverished West Coast, you know, like Glasgow and areas like that. So if for example, a parent had tuberculosis, they'd take the kids off and say, we're going to give them respite from the disease and the smog and all that in the cities. And they were shoving them in these kids' homes. And they started taking a lot of girls up here, right? And a lot of girls were being put into these industrial schools. And they were just met with total brutality, absolute brutality. And one was in Perthshire, just near Perth, called Forneath, I can't remember exactly. And it was a huge, huge school that was set up, and these kids were taken mainly from Glasgow and put into this school. So Forneath was one of these homes, and the kids were brutalised mainly by the women staff, which always is bizarre. And I want to go into that, why that happens, why that men will do a certain amount of abuse and women will do another. And there's a reason. Everything has a reason. What you've got to do is you've got to look at the history and you've got to look at human nature, and it will explain it, right? And it's a fascinating topic, but no one really joins the dots with these things. But there's money to be made in it. You had the Quarriers' homes up here. Quarriers, where, you know, there was this guy, Quarrier, was this philanthropist and all that. But they found out that if they move a kid from one home to another, they get a payment. So it was just trafficking. They were just making money in trafficking. And one of the biggest traffickers of children was a guy called Dr. Bernardo. Under the recent government inquiry, the IICSA inquiry, ICSA, they found out that Dr. Bernardo had trafficked 40,000 children from the ages, I think, of 4 to 14 into domestic servitude and sexual slavery in the New World, so Canada, New Zealand, Australia. He sold them. What a tosser. And of course they're seen as this philanthropist, this benevolent man. No, he weren't. He knew what he was doing. And they did it on a local level. They would move kids from one home and get a bounty for moving the kids. So the government were paying for it because they were offsetting it to these, and like Quarriers, the abuse that went on in the Quarriers' homes.
And most of those kids were damaged, or they were orphaned, or, as you said before, nobody's coming to look for them.
No one's coming to look for them. And then they scratch their head and wonder why there's such, especially in the 80s, an epidemic of heroin use in Scotland, and stabbings, you know, and alcoholism. And Scotland was quite unique because people didn't start off smoking it. They went straight into needle use, jagging they called it. And it was pleasure-pain thing. So there was something in the Scottish psyche that was hardwired. It's got to hurt in order for it to be pleasure. And of course, when you look at when these kids were put in these systems and what is a byproduct going to be, it's going to be chaos. And when the government inquiry started looking at these homes, where was one? There was one, Lorette. It was called Lorette. It was a boys' school. So bear in mind, we got Forneath with the girls at this boys' school. So Lorette, it was an expensive fee-paying school. But the brutality of the kids, the inquiry had never heard anything so bad. And it went from caning them, which is bad enough, to torturing them. So some were held down onto the metal mattresses and electricity put on it, and they were electrocuting them like a third world prison. And in this Lorette, another thing they used to do, they dug a pit and they put a kid in there and urinate on them, or pour buckets of urine on them and things like that. And one of the people who went to this school, his mother had abandoned him as a kid, and there were a hierarchy that, these were the gentry, the landed gentry of Scotland. Was a guy called Nicholas Fairbairn. So Nicholas Fairbairn was abandoned by his mother, so we got abandonment issues. A very promiscuous and abusive relationship with the father, so we got that emotional damage, and then he gets sent to this Lorette boarding school, where he too endures this, urinated on, whipped, beaten. He then goes on to become the leading advocate, barrister, QC, Queen's Counsel for Scotland. He becomes the advocate depute, which is the head of the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland. So he runs the judicial system for Scotland. His partner in crime is a bloke called Bob Henderson, Dirty Bob. Bob Henderson went on to get involved in a big rent boy racket, which was classed as a magic circle because cases just disappeared, involving in Edinburgh. The main chambers for Scotland is in Edinburgh. There was a lot of perversion going on there. Nicholas Fairbairn teamed up with Bob. Nicholas Fairbairn started to rape Bob Henderson's daughter. When they started interviewing kids from Forneath, the girls' school, they were shown pictures of different people, and the kids would be picked up by the women's staff, selected during the day. A man would come and they'd point out to what girl, and the female staff would move them to one side, and them kids were then given a medicine and drug them. They would wake up in this posh house. They all remembered its smell of tobacco, pipe tobacco, with these posh white men, and they would just be raped by all these old men, young girls, little girls, which the women were gating money from the school in Forneath to take them there. And out of 20, 16 of them picked out Nicholas Fairbairn as being their rapist. What made it worse was, at that time, Nicholas Fairbairn was having a long-standing relationship with a woman called Esther Ranson. And Esther Ranson had set up a charity called Childline, which is when children are abused, they can ring up this line. And when I worked for Child Protection in the Metropolitan Police, one of the pathways of referral was from the schools, from neighbours, to refer a kid that's been abused. But one was meant to be Childline. And I can remember asking someone, how many cases have we had from Childline? In 1 year, out of the hundreds we got, only 2 came from Childline. 2. And when you look at it, you think, don't scratch your head as to why this goes on. So we've now got the grooming gang scandal in England, where they've seen predominantly Pakistani, Kashmiri minicab drivers from provincial towns, where there is a predominance of that ethnic grouping, that have been taking these kids, these young girls, and raping them and in amongst their own community and probably elsewhere. And it's just what they do. This is what groomers do, right? But there's been a huge cover-up because of their religious background and the fact that they're a predominant feature in that town. So they can guarantee a lot of votes, these tight-knit Muslim communities, because, they do vote, whereas the average white family don't bother voting. There's a huge apathy in there. So if you've got multi-occupancy in a house with 6 males in there, you could pretty much guarantee that vote to go to one person, That's why someone who can get in, and maybe one of their own people can get in, they can stay in, because that's what they'll do. They'll bulk vote for that person, and that is so-called democracy, right? And we see now in the recent voting figures in the UK, where independent parties such as Reform have done so well because people are fed up with the corruption. The police have been reluctant to intervene, or haven't bothered. or anyone exposing it, they've attacked them, and same as local councils have done the same. But it's no different to any one of us that looks into this. It's all the same, because there is a cover-up, and it is a conspiracy, because that's what it is. When two or more people work in concert for a criminal cause, it's a conspiracy, right? And they've always done it. So my argument is, yeah, the Pakistanis are the new kids on the block. They are, and they're being allowed to get away with it. But before them, the Albanians were doing it. The Kosovans were doing it. The Lithuanians were doing it. The Jamaicans were doing it, right? There's women that were doing it. The kids' homes were doing it. The kids' homes were doing it. They were probably one of the main sources at one point. You know, the Maltese were doing it. They've all been doing it. The church has done it, you know, and on top of it, the kids are a commodity, because there's people that will pay money to screw the kids. And we saw that with the Cray twins that were there, were getting the young boys for parliamentary parties, such as people like Dryburgh and Boothby. You know, Ronnie Cray was involved with them for homosexual parties and young boys. You know, there's enough testimonials of ex-gangsters that were saying, yeah, we knew that not just one, but both of them were into young boys. But Ronnie Cray especially.
There was a story, he was found in bed with a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah, and maybe it went younger than that.
Younger.
You know? Younger than that. There's quite a few testimonials. I've had a hard time off their family. I've had a few threats from them because I've been speaking about this. Yeah, family, you know.
Well, as you said, John, the truth hurts.
The truth hurts, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you that the levels in which this works. So, at the top there is a cover up, because I've mentioned about the emotional broken person, right? So if we take, for example, a human being, we're made up of three elements, right? Look, I can draw this out. Oh, look, we got this here.
Yes, on you go.
Let me show you. Look, there's a couple of things I want to show you. So as a human being, if we can take three elements, right, and we'll take them like a snowman, right? So what we got? We start off. We got the intellectual self, right? The intellectual self. We're made up of our intelligence and our thoughts, everything else. In the middle, we've got the emotional self, right? And down there, we've got the physical. I'm going to show this up to the camera. Right, here we go. Turn it round, right? So there we go. This is a person in essence, right? The intellectual self, the emotional self, the physical self. So this is a young child, right? This is a young child. And this child gets sexually abused, right? What does it do? Does it affect, the overall of this? Well, it will affect the intelligence. Of course it will, because it's horrific and you're learning things you shouldn't learn. But someone who's emotionally abused can go on to excel. They can go on to, like, achieve, right? Little arrow, that shows achievement. So they can overachieve. And you get that with CEOs of companies that, they found that they've got this rugged ability, was it something is weakness, we must carry on, we've got to make money, that Gordon Gekko, do you know what I mean? That rugged, never give up, the intelligence to keep going and everything else, and that stoicness, because there's pain there. No one will ever hurt me like I've been hurt. I'm going to show the world who I am. I'm not a nothing. I am a someone. So they can go on to really do well in life, right? Because there's a need to show, and there's a pain, there's a hurt. Physically, can they do well if they've been sexually abused? Oh, of course. You listen to any of these testimonies of these guys that have been in the SAS. They're being interviewed all the time now, right? So many of them said, I was brought up in a kids' home and I was abused. The BBC did a programme about the Falklands War, Falklands veterans, and they followed the parachute regiment. And a lot of them suffered terrible trauma, but there was a couple who didn't. They're like, well, I just got on with it. And the two that just got on with it have both been sexually abused in the kids' homes, and both of them went on to join the SAS. Because no one will ever hurt me like I've been hurt. I know pain. I'm going to show the world. I'm going to emasculate myself more than I've been demasculated. I hate, and I'll get whatever you do to me is nothing to what I've been through. So they will go on to achieve incredibly well, right? And you can recognise this in people, right? Can recognise them in their achievements. What is it that makes you go through that training, that pulling? What is it that drives you? Your average person goes, you know what, I've had enough of this, I'm going home. It's not reasonable to go through that.
Because they've endured that pain, as a
They know
kid.
pain.
So they know.
They got anger, they got drive, they got, I'm going to show the world and I'm going to. It's the same as when you get guys big, muscly, tattooed and all that. Well, what's that for? It's protection, you know? And there's so many things you can look at with that. You know, anorexia, things like anorexia, you know? I worked with special needs kids for a while, and there was one girl that kept eating mashed up food, and I went, keep your eye on that girl, keep your eye on her. I went, why? I said, listen, because I worked with kids for so long and child abuse, right? They control what goes in their mouth. Nothing solid is going in my mouth. Do you get me? Nothing solid. So it'll be mashed up food because something solid has gone in that mouth that they don't like, right? And it's the same as that. I control what goes in my mouth, me. So nothing's going in. And that's why I get anorexic. Some get overweight heavily because it's comfort, you know, and some do it because it makes them look ugly. Because if I'm ugly, no one's coming near me. So you've got to look at this. And when you do, you start having a bit of compassion and understanding that's pain there. They're showing you the pain. Tattooing is self-harming, you know. Okay, it's trendy now, but it's only just become trendy. Before it was self-harming. It's an indicator. But we've missed one out here. Right, so they can achieve intellectually. Can they achieve emotionally? No. Gone, finished. Unless therapy is given and treatment is given, right, that clock stops. So if you're 5 years old when this happens, that clock stops. So you'll have someone who's a grown man with the emotional intelligence, the emotional capability of a 5-year-old kid. So if you tell a 5-year-old no, what do? Tell you in a corner. Fuck you, F you, you know? I hate you, How many adults do we see behave like that? What is road rage? You cut someone up. You take a left turn when I'm going to kill you. Whoa. They've just showed you their emotional clock and it's stopped. So part of my job would be to recognise people's emotional clock. And you can do that many ways. You look at their value system. That's an emotional thing, your value system. Right, I'm a man approaching 60 years old. What do I value? I like walking my dog. I like it. I like watching the sun come up. I like watching it go down. What would a 12-year-old boy want? Oh, he'd want. Give an example of a grown man said this. He said, my typical day is driving a Bugatti. Getting on a private jet, having a threesome and eating pizza. Who said that? Andrew Tate. A grown man. That's what a 12-year-old kid would want. So you know that his emotional... And look at that guy. Has he achieved intellectually? Pretty much, yeah. Billionaire. Done it through intellect. Physically. World level fighter, yeah. Emotionally, man, the guy's a train crash. But people think, no, mate. He's a train crash because of that. What do they value? You should value something akin to your age group. But it's also a way into people. And it usually is, you look at the relationship at home. What was it like mainly with mum? Because mum has to allow other people in, right? The lioness should always protect the cubs. And if she don't, mum's allowed other people in that have hurt. So even if dad's done it or stepdad, mum's allowed it. Mum wasn't there. Mum, you know. So you work out what their relationship with their mother is. And that's mainly to do with suspects as well. But also it goes for everyone. You look at what it does to people in society. So when you speak to them, you can gauge it. You can work it out. And this isn't, I'm not doing this to attack anyone now, but you can see it. You can see it. And this is what they should be training the police in.
It's always a great lesson sitting with you, John.
Yeah.
You learn so much.
And it's fantastic. So what I'm going to do now, while I've got this board out, I'm going to show you how these kids slip through the net. I don't want to step forward to that.
No, you're fine.
Right. How do these kids slip through the net, right? And so when I was looking at the care home system, and I'm thinking, why are the police not doing anything about this? what is it that's allowing it? It can't just be perverted corruption. There's other levels, right? So we mentioned on another episode about the Madeleine McCann case, where kids go missing all the time. But if they're from impoverished background, your local inquiries are going to be in impoverished backgrounds. Is that going to be nice to do? No, it's going to be a bit of a crap. But if your kid's from a tropical island, a beautiful paradise, and you have to go out there for an inquiry, that's going to be a nice little trip with your business class flight and your $110 a day plus your accommodation and food already paid for. Who would not want to do that? So you've got that level as well, you know. But on the whole, you know, kids go missing all the time from these care homes, right? And this is something people need to look at, right? So years ago, we had these big industrial schools like the Bernardo's homes and the Quarriers homes and things like that. And they covered huge areas. They usually had their own swimming pool, their own sports grounds and all that. But there was a lot of abuse went on because a lot of these went up beginning of the last century, and proliferation after the big war, the First War and the Second World War. And there was a lot of terrible, terrible abuse went. And there was a lot of abuse by women were abusing kids throughout the 50s. And they couldn't work out why. And then they found out that a lot of these were war widows. They'd lost sons, they'd lost husbands, and they had a hatred of men. And they would take the hatred out on the boys. So a lot of boys got abused by women during the 40s and the 50s in the kids' homes. And when women abuse, it's done with a spitefulness that is 6 times out of what a man would do. A man has testosterone, so there's usually a sadistic or a sexual element to it. Women, it's spiteful. And with women, it's a need to be adored. So there's you will respect me. You have to look up to me. I am the boss. You get that pride-filled element with women. And there's another shocking statistic about women. It's just gone out of my head. But it tends to be on very, very young kids as well. So women have got the capability to hurt very, very young children, whereas men, it's not so much. They do it.
You see that with, who was the recent one? It was the babies with the nurses and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Where they attack the young babies.
Yeah, and you've got a few cases in the last 2 years of lesbian parents that were murdering kids that weren't theirs, and they were murdering them. There was about 3 cases in a year that were high profile in which kids got badly tortured. The 70s changed, and you saw a lot of men abusing men, young boys. And again, they thought, why? And you look at the patterns, there's always a pattern. And these patterns started occurring where you've got proliferation, like I said, in left-wing boroughs. And then when they looked at it, they realised, wow, what did they do in the 70s? Equality laws. And it was wrong to discriminate against homosexuals. So there's no attack on disparagement towards homosexuals or anything like that. I'm not saying that. We're intelligent people with an intelligent audience, so we need to keep that benchmark going here. But what happened was they turned around and they advised against checking the vetting status of any homosexual applicant for a residential kids home post, right? Which meant that a paedophile who's a homosexual could apply for a job and no one check up his background, right? Well, once one gets in there, he's going to tell his friend, and another one will get in there. And all of a sudden, you've got a gang of them. Now, there was one kids' home in South London called Shirley Oaks, and they found at one time there was 19 active known paedophiles working in this kids' home. Men, homosexual, paedophile men. So this is what happens, and it was left-wing councils that kept them in place, right, with a reluctance to adhere to, and this is probably what you're seeing with the grooming gangs. Those are keeping in place have probably got a dirty history themselves, because it's not just the people in the homes that will be abusing; they will be making money from getting other people to abuse them. There's huge money to be made in pornography. When I was an officer looking into child abuse and child pornography, a child pornography magazine costs the same money as a brand new saloon car. People were paying thousands. up to £7,000 for a child porn magazine. That's the money that's involved. Huge money. You know, it's a market. It's a massive... Kids are the biggest commodity going, right? But again, there's another side to this. Apart from the organised crime element to this, it's laziness and incompetence. And what you understand is that the police... This is the first time it's ever been put on podcast. The police is heavily compartmentalised. This is when we had a structured police force. We haven't got a structured police force anymore. We've got a chaotic mess, right? That I knew a guy that was a blacksmith farrier. His father was a blacksmith farrier, and so was his grandfather. And they all lived in the same cottage in the village, right? His son didn't want to be a blacksmith farrier and didn't really have what it took to be a blacksmith farrier, right? Didn't want it. And he used to say to me, when I die, this dies. This dies. My son don't want to know. There's a break in continuity. And unless we're careful, if they don't start bucking their ideas at the police and start training their staff properly and doing a proper investigative job, we will lose that continuity. We will need to look abroad to bring that back, where countries that haven't abandoned it and haven't abandoned their people. And this is what's happening. It's dangerous. It is dangerous. And, you know, they're taking graduates and all that, but students have got this reputation of being lazy. I don't want to knock students or anything like that, but it was always when we were growing up that they laid in bed all day and did nothing, you know. Whereas ex-military people were up at the crack of dawn, up running and ready to go, which is what you need, you know. You need proactivity. This sort of criminality, the crimes against children, child prostitution, cannot be dealt with a reactive stance. So if you want to go out there and say, well, no child prostitute came my way, so therefore it don't exist, that is a fundamentally most naive thing to have done. But this is what we're hearing from chief constables all the time. Well, we didn't know what was going on. We never heard of it, right? So when I took over looking for child abuse in London Borough of Haringey, very impoverished inner city borough, and I said, how many kids homes to social services? Oh, we've got 23. Give me a list. And I said to an officer on the child protection team, are there any children in the London Borough of Haringey that are being pimped out? No, 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 no. Emphatically no. Right. So I picked up the phone, I rang up the first kids home, right? And boom. I said, how many kids you got? 5. How many do you lose at the weekend to prostitution? 3. Well, okay, how do you know? Well, a car picks them up. We've got the number plate of the car if you want. I went, all right, do police know? Yeah, we tell them. Nothing happens. Okay. Next, within 10 minutes, I found 10 kids. By the end of 3 days, I found 52 children, 52. One care home had 6 residents and would lose 5 to prostitution every weekend. And they were known to police as missing persons because they would go missing, but they would come back again. So let's show you now how this works, right? Okay. So we're going to draw a little kid. And for the purpose of an argument, we're going to draw a little girl, right? Little ponytail there, little hair. Right, there we go. She's not happy. Right. So this is our little girl. Right, here we go. Camera, I know she's little there. Right, she's in the middle, right? So this little girl is in a care home, right? And she's going missing on a Thursday and she's coming back on a Monday, right? And she's been picked up outside a kids' home and she's been taken out for the purpose of prostitution. So the kids' home monitor it and they write it down and they send a form off. And this form goes off to the police, to the social services, right? But the kid comes back, so they're not really bothered. She's going to come back. When she comes back on a Monday, she's got blood coming out from between her legs because there's all sorts of nastiness going on now. She's kicking off because she's been taking crack cocaine and heroin and she's coming down and she's starting to cluck. She's only a little kid, you know, maybe 12 years old or something like that. So she don't understand the situation and she's angry and she's coming down. So when she goes missing, the police get a report sent to them and it gets sent to the missing persons unit. So the missing persons unit, are told of this girl's absconding, right? So they should go looking for her. They should go look for her, right? They should go and get her. And when she comes back, they should be debriefing her. They should be saying, look, Missy, where are you going? What's been happening? They should proactively go wait up outside that kid's home. They should be speaking to the kid's home. And they should be saying, what happens to little Missy? And they've written it down in their occurrence log, which is an original note, which is saying, yeah, look, this car picks them up, because these homes are giving me registrations. There's a black guy picks her up, not a Kashmiri Pakistani, right? Back then it was a Rasta man would pick them up. That was one example. Another would be a customer, you know, and all that. And off they go. We've heard rumours she's going to a sauna to work, right? And when she comes back, she's in a real bad way. We tell the police, but because she comes back, she's no longer missing. So why investigate it, right? Because she's going missing, but she returns. So you get people like David Icke and a few of these others say there's 100,000 children go missing a week. Yes, David Icke, they do go missing a week, but they come back. One or two might not, but on the whole, they come back. But the missing persons will say, right, so they're told that this girl's been picked up. She's involved in prostitution. Well, that changes it. So who should deal with it? The vice unit. The vice unit, the detectives on the vice unit, with their proactive capabilities, they should, over to the camera, the vice unit, right? Because this girl was involved in sexual exploitation under the provisions of the Street Offences Act and under the amended provisions of that the new legislations, the police unit for whatever county or national force should say, right, our vice officers are going to sit up on this girl because she's being picked up, she's being exploited sexually, right? We're going to go and get her, right? And we're going to have her, right? Put her into a place of safety, and those doing it, they're in big trouble because they could go away for a very long time for this. And anyone who has sex with her, that's statutory rape because she's only a little kid. But the vice unit say, well, hang on a second, she's in a kid's home. That's nothing to do with us because there's a care order. So because she's subject to a care order and she's involved in crime, that goes down to the Child Protection Unit. Right. So there you go. Here we go. Called a Venn diagram. So the Child Protection Unit, they said, right, little Missy, right, she's subject to a care order. She's subject to the provisions of the Children's Act of 1984. That's our job. We need to go and protect her, that no one does this to her, right? But then they say, well, hang on a second. She's getting paid for sex. That's the vice unit. And the missed person should be dealing with that. So what's happening here is they're all rowing out. No one's rowing in. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a kid falls through the net. Right, so me, Mr. Jon Wedger, I found this out. I thought, wow, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get all the people that claim to want to protect a child. So I'm going to get the charities, two main charities that always spring to mind to do with kids. I'm going to get them in a meeting. I'm going to get the social services involved because they need to know about this. I'm going to get NGOs, which are non-government organisations. There's quite a few of them that proclaim to help the children, these independent ones. And I'm going to get the policing units, and I'm going to get all these units together, and I'm going to say, look, these kids are slipping through the net, and here's the name of all the kids. We need to go get them, right? Brilliant. We're going to solve this in a heartbeat. So I held this meeting straight away. A member from the leading child protection, child charity, the leading one. I'm not going to say who it is, but it is in the report I gave to the government. And a major newspaper knows about it. They turned around and said to me, their head for child safeguarding, said, yeah, you're treading on toes. We'll be dealing with this. You're not to deal with this anymore. And within a few days, I was moved from that unit. You know, and it never got looked at again. And this is what we're dealing with all the time. all the time. This is why we have this proliferation of it. And it's so easy to solve. It's so straightforward to solve. There's legislation in place which is quick, effective, and deal with it. We don't need any more legislations. We don't need any government inquiries. We need people nicked. And we need to stop the convoluted red tape of these interfering, good-for-nothing charities that do absolutely F all to protect kids from influencing policing. And it has to stop. And that is simple. And everything, the simplest solution is always the easiest ones. And it's so easy to solve. Yet when you do, bang, they hit you. Shut you down. And we see this consistently.
It's so horrific, John, when you put it across like that.
Yeah.
And as you said, that was only a few days and you'd found 52 kids. And then when you took off that, you think of the amount of children that have to go through those horrendous things.
Do you know the other awful thing? Is that these guys at Groom, whether it be, all we hear about is the Pakistanis. I'm getting fed up of it. Come on, people, wake up. There are more perverts on the world than Kashmiri minicab drivers. You know, okay, they might be getting away with it with impunity, but so are all the others. The one who was running the main network was a white woman, English girl, a woman that was running it. You know, we need to start waking up to this, and the sheer scale. So the other thing which happens is you get a guy, they call him a Romeo. So he'll get involved with the young girl from the kids' home because she's in a home, she's not got mum and dad. There's no love. There's, you know, it's a sterile environment. There might be some nice social workers and all that, but, you know, there's some vulnerable people, and especially if they've been sexually abused themselves. They're going to have all sorts of issues of trust, anger and everything. There's a lot going on in their heads and in their hearts and in their bodies, you know. And all of a sudden a guy turns up and he says, you look lovely, you're nice, or a woman, which is a case I dealt with, you know. A woman started grooming the young girls, let me do your hair. But this lad, for example, let's just stick it with a lad. He tells her, say he's an Albanian guy. Let's pick on them for once, you know. So he's an Albanian guy and he says, you look lovely, you're a beautiful girl and all that. Let me take you out. You know, he's older than her, maybe he's 18, 19. And then he starts having sex with her, right? And she's had sex before because she's victim of incest and interfamilial abuse. But she never had love, and this guy's given her a bit of love, and he starts buying her things. And then he says, come on, we'll smoke some cannabis. Always starts with cannabis. As long as I live, I yet to have anyone convince me of the benefits of that stuff. I'm telling you now. I've had them all. I've been in the festivals, these hippie places and communes. Please. Anyway, it's a gateway drug, and that's it, right? Anyway, and alcohol, give them all that. And then, but the one is the heroin and the crack. That's, you've got them, you know, and that soon comes. But he starts having sex, and then it's like, I'll come to a party, and there'll be another guy there, and he'll say, well, go and have sex with, you know, and it'll start passing them over. She might not want to do them, get her drunk, get her drugged, and the guy will then have sex. And he'll say, look, we made money. If you do that every week, it's not bad, but you can make money here, good money, me and you, and we can run together. And so she starts doing it.
So it's like a slow process of manipulation.
Manipulation, yeah. And then we'll get you in. And of course, she's now controlling men. Whereas before men controlled her, she's now controlling men. She's in charge, you know? So she then works in the sauna. We see these saunas everywhere now, right? You know, oh my God, they're gateways for paedophilia. That's why they were always illegal, because they knew what would go on, right, in these places. Yes, there are some women of age, but there's a lot will entertain the younger girls, and they do. You know, they'll put them down as an 18-year-old model, right? Bring up a sauna. So you got on, and you wait to say, oh, we got 18-year-old Chantel, she's this and that. Give their statistics. There's a good chance that ain't an 18-year-old. Good chance that's a 16 or a 14-year-old, you know? And they start making money. But here's the sinister thing. The Romeo will then say, you know your friend, yeah, she's pretty, why don't you get her? So she'll say to her friend, come and stay in the kids' home. So, well, I can't, I live at home. We'll tell the social worker that your stepdad's doing this to you, or your mum's doing this. They'll put you in care. Come on, we're making money. and we can get the drug. We can get this. Come, it's all we got to do. Fuck them. Come with me, and that's what happens. So the girl then becomes a groomer as well. Becomes a grooming gang.
Unintentionally, in a way.
Eh?
Unintentionally, in a way.
Yeah, but it's still part of it. I mean, coerced. But there was a case. There's a charity that I did quite a bit for that helps a lot of the kids over in Rotherham, and there was one of the girls there, and she said, and I think she's been on telly a few times, this girl, as a victim of grooming gangs, but she told me, this woman, she said, I know this girl has got many, many other girls involved in it as well. She never says it when she's on the tape, but she said, I know she has, because I've seen her do it. I've seen her do it for a Pakistani boyfriend. And see, this is the evil of it, you know, and of course there's the money, and then, you know, they're thinking that they're women and all that, but it happens with the boys. The men, the lads tend to more do it in the gay clubs. Back when it had gone off the street with the rent boys on the street, and it moved into the gay clubs. And here's the most sinister thing of it. So we used to raid brothels, right? So we go into a brothel, and it's usually me or another lad to send us in first as a customer. So you pay your fee on the door, which is about £20 just to get in. So you got to pay 20 quid, and then you go, and then you pick a girl and you negotiate your fee with the girl for half an hour or whatever you wanted to do. But as soon as they opened the door, which was usually a security door, I'd go in with my money, but I wouldn't shut the door, put my foot in it, and the next thing the team would come in, we'd call bomb burst. We'd just mob-handedly take the whole brothel over, smash every door in, everyone get nicked, everyone. And then we'll work out who's who. So we did it for immigration and for underage kids, right? And also sometimes you'd find cocaine in their guns and things like that, 'cause it's organised crime. Right, and that's where we will catch some little kids, as well as this stuff. Right, let's go on to boys, rent boys. So there was a brothel in an affluent part of London, right, in an area called Earl's Court. And it was quite a well-known brothel. So they said, right, we're going to do the same, but the protocol's a bit different. So what I had to do was knock on the door. The guy opens the door, and then it shuts. So I'm shut in there, right? No bomb bursting. I'm to tell him I'm a police officer, that there are X amount of other officers. They would then lead me to a room, sit me down. They'd then invite the officers into this room. We'd be given tea and coffee and await the arrival of the legal representative for that brothel. So they'd wait for a solicitor to turn up, which could take an hour, and then we were guided through one by one through to see if there's any young men in there. So how long do you think it takes a young man to get extracted covertly from that brothel? And that's how it worked. And that shows the corruption involved, because those that wanted them little boys could have been politicians, could have been heads of state, could have been magnets for the business empire.
As you said before, John, if you take a step back and you look at it objectively, then it tells its own story.
It does. And what gets me more, this was a protocol that the superintendent for that unit would adhere to. Where is he? Why is he not on here? Why is he not here saying, John's right, this is an appalling situation? The senior officers, the ones, they keep their mouth shut because they're cowards, because they want their pension. They don't want to go through what I went through. But you go on any street in London or the UK and you say, have you ever heard of a police whistleblower who stands up for kids involved in prostitution? There's a good chance I'll be one or two names. But there weren't just two of us for the UK, there's many of us, but the others don't stand up. And it's wrong. And, you know, I think everyone's got a duty to be vocal on this topic.
Definitely.
You know? And when it comes to corruption, I don't care. I'm not interested. I'm not interested, or wasn't interested. I'm a different animal now. But back then I wasn't interested if a drug dealer got a beating and his money stolen. I'm not saying I ever witnessed it. I was aware of it. I don't care. Would I have told anyone if I'd have seen a drug dealer getting his money stolen? No, I would not have done. And anyone who wanted to be aggressive to the police, if they were bashed up and smashed up, would I go opening my mouth? No, I wouldn't. Didn't care. Weren't interested. Nothing to do with me. If you want to deal drugs, sell drugs, import drugs, and the police come and nick your money, do you know, live by the sword, die by the flipping thing, you know?